Hello there. Welcome to Food for Thought. My name is Pastor Clint Lange from Hillside Community Church in 100 Mile House, BC, Canada. It's the 23rd of June, 2020. Well, I've been thinking about food for thought and what it is that I'd like to bring to you today. And I just thought that I would talk to you about the book of Jonah, particularly the first chapter of Jonah. For those of you who aren't aware of the story of Jonah, we have a scenario set where we have the people of Israel that were being oppressed and absolutely brutalized by a northern kingdom that was in its day the most powerful kingdom in the world. And Jonah didn't really like the people from this place because they were oppressive. They brutalized cities within the ancient Near East. The Assyrians, when they came to a town or a city, they would lay siege to it, and they would often destroy the entire city, and everyone in it would either be killed. They would make sport out of killing people, and they would take people prisoners and put them to work as slaves. And if there was an empire in Jonah's day that he wished didn't exist, it was Nineveh. So when you live in a land that's being oppressed by an evil power, the tendency is to stay clear from that place as much as you can. And this is food for thought because, we may not have Nineveh these days in the same way, at least not in our culture. But there are things that God designed for us to involve ourselves with, where it's not necessarily a pleasant scenario that we face. As a matter of fact, it's a hostile environment that he calls us into. Now, Jonah was approached by the Lord, and God asked him to go to the capital of Assyria, Nineveh. And this is what it says in Jonah chapter 1. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. The Ninevites were scary. Their king was powerful. And God is calling little Jonah to go and preach against that great city. No, Jonah did not like this calling from God, not one bit. He anticipated all kinds of pain and possibilities for going out of his way into such a hostile environment. Does God call us to hostile circumstances sometimes? I believe that he does. Not everything that God calls us to is going to be easy. Just because it's difficult doesn't mean that it's not right. God knew exactly where Jonah would fit into the scenario. He knew exactly the message that he wanted Jonah to send to the Assyrian king and the people of this great city. But Jonah, no. He was like, God, I would rather go where it's easy. A lot easier than what I've had to deal with. And a lot easier than what you're telling me I have to do. Because it's already been difficult with those Assyrians and the Ninevites. And you're asking me to go and preach against them and what they're doing? Well, the Lord said, the wickedness of the people of Nineveh has come before him. There's a lot of oppressed people and a lot of people that were suffering, and their cries for justice were going up before God. But Jonah, nope, he didn't want anything to do with it. Can you blame him? Who likes to go into hostile territory? Particularly when you're called into hostile territory to bring a message that might not necessarily be very popular or received all that well, and as a matter of fact, it could cause you physical torture or even your death. Well, before we're too critical of Jonah, we ought to think about that for ourselves. Jonah, it says, he went away. Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port. Well, if you know Israel, Joppa is modern-day Jaffa, and it's on the Mediterranean seacoast. Nineveh is in the northern interior, where modern-day Iraq is. So Jonah, he took off, and he went in an absolutely opposite direction to get as far away as he could from the place that God wanted him to put his roots in. And so he went there, and Joppa is a seaport right on the sea. After paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. Well, when God asks us to do something difficult and we run the other way, can we really flee from him? No way. King David said, "Where can I go from thy presence?" You can't go anywhere from God's presence. If God has called you to a task, he wants us to trust him, that he's going to be our sufficiency and our strength in the midst of the trial that we will face. He doesn't say that our life is going to be a cakewalk. He doesn't say that we're going to be successful and prosperous and have a life of ease when we're in his kingdom. You see, we're at war. There's an enemy out there. The Bible says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers of darkness in high places. You see, we have an enemy in Satan, and his design is to see people destroyed, to see people reject God, to embrace wickedness and rebellion against God. And everything he stands for is wicked. And you see, in this particular case, Nineveh was being influenced by demonic forces and the power of Satan. So really, when Jonah's running away from his calling, he's running away because he doesn't trust that God is going to do the right thing. Maybe he doesn't trust that God is going to protect him. Or maybe he doesn't want the Ninevites to be given an opportunity to turn from their wickedness because he wants to see them burn. Well, here we are. Then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. All the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his own God. And they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. But Jonah had gone down below the deck, where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. The captain went up to him and said, "How can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us, and we will not perish." So God is trying to get Jonah's attention. And Jonah has, unbeknownst to him, put a lot of people in a great deal of danger. These sailors, they were ignorant men that didn't know the true God. They called out on their gods, and, well, nothing happened. Why? Because their gods were no gods at all. The true living God was the one that had called Jonah. And Jonah was asleep when the storm came. And the storm began to swallow up all the people in the environment that Jonah fled to. So, if we think we're an island unto ourselves, we're gravely mistaken. If we flee from the Lord, if we run away from a calling that's difficult to try and make something for ourselves that's easy, God is not going to just let us just sit there. He's going to facilitate a change of heart for us. Because if He's chosen us to do something difficult in our minds, and we reject that, He's just not going to let us, meander about our way. He's going to cause us to come to the end of ourselves. And in the process of coming to the end of ourselves, everyone that is in the boat that we're in, trying to run away from God, is going to suffer the consequences too. God loved those sailors, and He loves Jonah, so He sends the storm. And it's funny how even in our disobedience, God can speak through that, and He can show us, He can show other people His truth, even when we are in the midst of the storm. So what happened next? Then the sailors said to each other, "Come, let us cast lots to find out who is responsible for this calamity." And they cast lots, and the lot fell to Jonah. God made sure of that. So they asked him, "Tell us, who is responsible for making all this trouble for us? What do you do, and where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you?" He answered, "I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land." This terrified them, and they asked, "What have you done?" They knew he was running away from the Lord because He had already told them so. The sea was getting rougher and rougher, so they asked him, "What should we do to you to make the sea calm down for us?" "Pick me up and throw me into the sea," he replied, "and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you." So here's Jonah. He's caught. He knows that he's responsible for the storm, and God is confronting him. And he knows that all these men are in danger because he was disobedient. So he did what was prudent. He asked them to throw him into the sea, and I'm sure Jonah expected at this point that was likely going to be his transition to eternity, because I don't think he was expecting what was going to happen next. See, the men didn't want to do this. The people that were with Jonah on the boat that was running away from God, they had no desire to kill a man or to cause a man to be killed on their watch. So instead, the men did their best to row back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Then they cried out to the Lord, "O Lord, please do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man, for you, O Lord, have done as you have pleased." And then they took Jonah, and they threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. At this, the men greatly feared the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to Him. So here's this disobedient Jonah running from God. And what does God do? He uses the calamity that was because Jonah was being disobedient to speak into the lives of the people around him by His grace. Isn't that so much like God? He can take our foolish decisions and when we're repentant and we do the right thing and we say, Lord, I've sinned against you. That sometimes means being humble to other people that we've brought into our mix and saying, listen, I've sinned against the Lord. You need to toss me overboard and don't be concerned because it's my responsibility before God. They're not going to like to toss you overboard. I'm sure they won't. But God made the sea grow calm as soon as Jonah hit the water. The sea just went, whoof. Wow. So these men who were caught in Jonah's calamity, they were given mercy by God. And they went, oh my, you are the living God, for you didn't let your servant get away with what he was attempting to do. Spoke to them. But God, in his great mercy and grace on those men, also gave great mercy and grace to Jonah, because it says here, but the Lord provided a great fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was inside the fish 3 days and 3 nights. We don't know what kind of fish it was. We don't know if it was a whale or some kind of giant groper or, a huge fish of some sort that's extinct. We don't know what kind of fish this was, but it was huge. And Jonah must have been packed into this fish's stomach. And in the midst of the waves, he would have been going, well, Lord, I thought I was going to drown, but now apparently I am going to be digested. Well, I deserve it, God. I have disobeyed you. I've gone my own way. So, if this is how it's going to end, I guess this is how it's going to end. But from inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord, and he said, in my distress, I called to the Lord, and he answered me. And from the depths of the grave I called him for help, and you listened to my cry. You hurled me into the deep and into the very heart of the sea, and the currents swirled about me. All your waves and breakers swept over me, and I said, I've been banished from your sight. Yet I will look towards your holy temple. The engulfing waters threatened me. The deep surrounded me. Seaweed was wrapped around my head. To the roots of the mountains I sank down. The earth beneath barred me in forever, but you brought my life up from the pit, O Lord God, when my life was ebbing away. I remembered you, O Lord, and my prayer rose to you in your holy temple, Those who cling to worthless idols forfeit the grace that could be theirs. But I, with a song of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will make good. Salvation comes from the Lord. So, and Jonah prayed inside this fish, that very prayer that I just read to you. Well, if you're thinking about running from God when he gives you a difficult mission, think again. God's call is the only way to go. He has a plan for you, and he's going to take care of you. And just because it's not right, or just because it's difficult, does not mean that it is not right. This is food for thought. God bless you.